My name is Taylor Dolan, and I am an artist and an author and an illustrator. And today I am going to show you around my tiny home studio where I have kind of made the perfect setup where I can get work done about 10 feet from my bed. My first project as an illustrator, I was approached by a company called the Folio Society, and they make these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful limited edition classic books, and they bring in contemporary artists to re-illustrate them. And they sent me an email asking if I would be interested in working on The Phantom of the Opera, which is just a dream and a half. I'm a theater kid. I did theater all my life. The book is dark and creepy. It's full of rats and joy. And they were basically telling me to just go full morbid delightfulness. So this is, look, that's the front cover, which just is so cool. And they let me wrap the cover. So I don't know how well you can see that, but it's screen printed onto this yellow fabric. And then they also gave me designs on the paper, which this never happens. This is I have one book on my shelf that has this, and I cherish it. End papers. This whole thing was magical. Anyway, basically I had a month and a half to illustrate 10 full color illustrations for this book and 23 black and white chapter headings. And the week before they were due, I didn't like the digital versions of the illustrations I made, and I live in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. So I flew to Chicago 7 days before the illustrations were due and screen printed them all by hand to get them exactly the way I wanted them to be. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. I basically spent my entire check for the book on getting to Chicago so that I could screen print them. And yeah, so that was my very first foray into the illustration world, which was a pretty fabulous start. At the same time as I was making Phantom of the Opera, I started percolating an idea that I had been thinking about for years and years and years, but wasn't quite sure how to execute. And it started with a simple phrase, the words Ghoul Scouts. I really wanted there to be a Girl Scout troop of the undead, but I wasn't sure how to make it happen. So I realized that I had to write my own book. And I chose middle grade fiction, which is ages like 6 to 10, depending on your reading level. And I wrote one chapter and illustrated it and sent it out to a publisher in England. And she said, "This is fabulous, write the whole thing, and if it doesn't get any worse, then we'll publish it." And so about a month ago, this came out in bookstores all over England, and it's called Ghoul Scouts, Welcome to Camp Croak. And about a week before quarantine happened, I was on a book tour around England, going to elementary schools and reading them parts of the book. And middle grade fiction is really fun because it's a lot of words. It's 160 pages, but every page is illustrated. So there's something to look at the whole time. And it's utterly ridiculous. Like, there's krakens, there's ghosts, there's zombies. It takes place in the swamps of Louisiana, so I made up like fake mosquito bugs, swamp things. And right now, I just finished the text for the second book in that series, and I start illustrating it basically this afternoon, which should take about 2 months. Yep, those are my book babies. In the 2.5 years since I graduated from my master's degree, I've been working from home and really had to learn some tough freelance artist life lessons. I think this interview and this tiny home studio tour is amazing because it is essential to set up a space. When I was in my master's degree, I was living in my professor's home and I was working at her kitchen table. And that was so difficult to do have any sort of continuity or flow when you're working. If you're constantly interrupted or you constantly have to clean up, you really need, at the very least, a small table where your work can always be out on. I don't see any other way that you can productively get things done. And it's not like you have to have a studio out of the home. That was way out of my price range. It's not something that I can afford. You just need a place where you've put on at least a fresh pair of pajamas and you're sitting and you're working for 8 hours. And the other big piece of advice I would give is, and this is kind of a harsh one, but on a whole, nobody cares that you and your work exist. So it's your job to work so incredibly hard to throw your art out into the world. You know, you're not going to hear responses from half the people you send it to. It's incredibly disheartening, but there's a reason you're making what you're making. And there's a reason I'm making these stories and these pieces. It's akin to breathing for me. There is no other way that I want to be living. And the only way I can get my books on bookshelves is if I advocate for myself and keep fighting. So that's what I do. And now I have almost 3 published books in 2 years. So good luck.